There's so much regulation. The standards set up a subjective test of what we do. Our regulatory arms, the state licensing. I believe that bureaucracies tend to stay put and continue insisting on doing things the way they've always been done. So we have several battles to fight.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
And welcome, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out in the podcast chair. Thank you for joining us. Folks, we are growing. It seems like every day we're seeing more and more appraisers being added to the Appraiser Coach podcast. Please spread the word. Seems like there's a lot of binge listeners as well. We see that once they find this, they go back and they listen all over again to from the beginning. I would tell you that you might want to just listen with one ear in the beginning. Things have improved over the years, thank goodness. But thank you for joining us. We've got a really exciting show today. There's been a lot of talk about the appraisal profession and where we're going as appraisers into the future. And I've got a super smart guy on with me. I'll introduce him in just a minute. First, I want to remind you, we are sponsored by three great companies. Speaking of the appraiser profession and where we're going, folks, if you want to know what's going on in the appraisal profession, you're going to want to reach out to a little company called Working RE Magazine. I say little company in quotation marks because they're big in the appraisal field. They know what's going on. You should find out more about them by going to workingre.com. Of course, another big name in the appraisal world is Alamode. Alamode is the software that I've been using for over 20 years, and you should be as well. They've been in business for over 30 years, and they help you to work more efficiently. Go to alamode.com or call them at 800-ALAMODE. And finally, we are sponsored by DataMaster. DataMaster, of course, is the ability for you to save 30 to 60 minutes per report because they will download information directly into your report. That's DataMaster. You can go to datamasterusa.com for more information. One more time, datamasterusa.com. Well, folks, I have a very interesting man, smart individual, an individual that knows his stuff. His name is George Dell. He is the owner of Value Metrics, a values-based education company. George has been authored in the Appraisal Journal. His education in economics and statistical analysis drove him to pursue additional applications in real estate analysis for further learning about mathematic fundamentals. George has earned his MAI, SRA, and ASA designations. He's out of San Diego, California, and he runs a blog called georgedell.com. How fitting for a blog by the author George Dell that you would pick georgedell.com. George, welcome to the program, friend.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Dustin.
I'll tell you, your name is lauded far and wide in a very positive light. I've got a good friend by the name of Tim Anderson, who's another smart individual out of Florida who sends me your articles quite frequently. He says, George is a smart guy. He knows what he's talking about. And from what I've read, George, Tim is right. You're a smart guy. You know what you're talking about. So welcome to the program. I appreciate you being on. Well, we're going to talk about the future of appraising today, and I'm glad you've decided to come on. Mainly, we're talking about a blog that you recently wrote called "Can the Appraisal Profession Be Saved?" George, let's just talk about the $64,000 question right up front. Can it be saved?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
No, actually, I wrote another blog, or am writing another one that's related to that issue. And the title of that one was, Will Another Profession Replace Appraisers? And in a sense, really what I'm saying is that if we continue doing things like we've done since literally the 1930s, then there's no point in saving the appraisal profession. But somebody has to do what we're good at doing, which is understanding markets and understanding analysis.
Okay, so let's talk about that. You say if we continue to do what we've always done, what is it that we've always done that you think is going to be outdated?
Well, let's go back to the 1930s and 40s. Data was hard to get. It was mostly brokers, real estate agents that were doing appraisals. They knew the people in town. There was no MLS. There was no data sources. Gosh, can you believe there was not even any internet at all back then?
Oh, well, it was a few years.
I mean, there was not even printed information. Just scratching together 2 or 3 sales that you knew about. Maybe going to the county courthouse was pretty much the first thing appraisers did back in those days. Find 2 or 3 other sales, and maybe if you can put together 3 or 4 comparables that you think were competitive, that's what you went with. But then, on the other hand, we owned that data. We were the ones that had the better data because we had gathered it and improved it and talked to the people.
I want to focus on that, and maybe not focus on it, but put a thumbtack in that, because I think that will become important as we talk through this. When you say they owned the data, would you agree with me, George, that whoever needs an appraisal, and I know things have changed dramatically, and sometimes interest and self-interest, if you will, is not so much down this road, but if you want an individual that can perform a professional service for you regarding valuation service, you're going to want to know or go to the guy or the gal that's got the data, right?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. So how are things changing?
Well, that is the big what we owned the data, and when we weren't watching, suddenly we didn't own the data anymore, and we were buying it.
Exactly.
Most of my career, I'm paying for data to 2, 3, 4 sources every month. I'm shelling out, and in the past, good data was what we sold, and the judgment and the analysis was the judgment was important. The analysis was almost trivial. Like, here, I got 4 comps that are similar, and I think here's the value. Done.
Things have changed, obviously, in the last few years. As you pointed out, the data now is given to us, or we purchase that, if you will. We go out and first of all, let's talk about the trustworthiness of that data. Talk to that for a little bit.
The trustworthiness, it probably in many ways it's about the same. I think the electronic data sources, certainly data has gotten better. I'm comparing to how my MLS was 30 years ago compared to today. It is better. There's no doubt about that. However, it's not better in terms of the very issues or the variables or the elements of comparison that appraisers need. For example, my personal expertise has evolved or devolved into a very narrow thing. I'm kind of the expert on view value most in Southern California, and that's not really an appraisal. It's estimating an adjustment. What is the adjustment for the view? And my clients are basically wealthy people fighting over obstructions, bushes growing in their way, trees, easements that have been violated or not violated. But you don't find that in our data, like what is the value of the view or even any measure of it. Some MLSs do have a pick list that brokers or agents can pick from, like view or ocean view or forest view or open view, but it's certainly not in any kind of order or sequence that could be thrown right into an analysis. So really the point being that the data is king, and appraisers have the ability, the knowledge to know what needs to be improved, verified, confirmed, enhanced, rated, scaled, whatever you want to call it, like view. And there are scientific methods of doing that. It's never perfect. You've always got variability, but we can do much, much better. I guess I'm going a long time here, but the point being is either appraisers will learn how to do some of these things using it's now known as data science, or some other profession will pick it up and do it.
Or
there's other issues.
What about technology, George? It's one thing to have the data. It's the other thing, as you talked about, to be able to properly analyze that data. I think that we would be dishonest with ourselves if we didn't acknowledge that technology is getting better and better at that analysis. Is that something that appraisers should fear in the future?
Well, not fear. I think we ought to grab onto it and run with it. Appraisers have the knowledge of the markets, and what's needed more than anybody else. We need to grab onto the technology and run with it. Data science are the key words. The big shift in data has been from sparse, terrible data to an abundance, overwhelm of data.
Mm-hmm.
And what data science is about is understanding how to help the human brain understand the data that's out there. Let's take an example. One appraisal, you might only truly have 2 comps, and that's it. Appraisers are really not allowed to ask the question, how much data do I need? We have to answer the question, what do I do with the data that I have?
Mm-hmm.
2 comps, or 12 comps, or 2,000 comps, or 2 million comps. If they're competitive with the subject, then that's the data that ought to be used. And that's what we're not good at, but we need to get good at it.
Super interesting. So let me pare it back what I think you're saying, George. In the early days, we're talking the early 1930s, 1940s, even through probably until the 1970s, 1980s, it was more about, and even maybe even longer than that, it was more about we were valuable, if you will, to the marketplace as appraisers because we had the data. And if people wanted to know what the value of something is, they would go to that source, which would be the appraiser. Where that has changed is that data is very abundant out there, and it's pretty easily accessible. Anybody with a computer and an internet connection can usually find that data. So where are we going now in the next 3 to 5 years, George? How are things going to change?
Well, the data is already out there. Let me kind of go through a history that leads up to that. And this is, I kind of live on my PowerPoint slides for my classes. And this was a presentation I did at the AI national meetings about 3 or 4 years ago. In fact, the then president and vice president of the AI, they were going to China, trying to get membership over there. This is a 4-stage history of appraisal thinking as it relates to data. Going back to the 1930s is what I call the data rummage era. Comps were whatever you could find, and the key word was availability. Is it just there at all? Then we pushed into around the 1960s, 70s, what I call the market analysis era. And the comps that we got there, well, we defined them as being similar sales that describe the market. The key there was convenience. We started getting MLS, started getting commercial data sources. But anyway, the data was available in print. When I started, I had a yellow marker, and I would make a photocopy of the MLS page. Every 3 months, the comps came out. In between, you had to look at the listing books. And you put a line around the comps you thought might be good, maybe 6 or 8 or 10 of them, and you go out in the field and look at 5 or 6 or 7, and then you go back to the office and you nail it down to 3. So then we got into when data, well, really around the time that the internet started getting very popular, and data started getting really easy. You could get in a matter of seconds, and you could get all of the competitive sales in a given market or neighborhood. And I call this the data discarding era. This is where we started going wrong. The comps, we still had this thinking, well, we got to get it down to 3 comps or 5 comps or 6 comps. What's the first thing I've got to do? Well, I got to get rid of everything but those 5 or 6. And I call that the avoidance era. So we went from availability of data to convenience of data. Now we moved into this norm of avoidance of data. How do we get rid of the data we don't need so we can comply with the traditional rules, the Fannie Mae form of 3 comps? For commercial appraisers, there was 6 or 7 comps on a spreadsheet, sideways. And I think where we are today, and this is really answering your question, is we're moving into what I call the data optimization era. And the key word there is optimizing. The science underneath that basically says that more information always gives you a better answer, except when it's too much data, and then it's garbage.
Yeah, then it's
but there is an ideal point. I'll stop with this. There is an ideal point, and it's called the Fisher information, related to the Fisher information function. Fisher was a guy basically that invented inferential statistics. And it basically says there's a trade-off between garbage and data that's relevant, which is information. That's an optimal point, and it could be 3 comps, it could be 30, it could be 3,000. We need to use whatever data is available. Now, relating to the technology, we have the technology today to do that easily and quickly. In my mind, easier and quicker than how we're struggling to make adjustments today.
Yeah, fascinating. You go from trying to narrow that data set down to the opposite of that and expand it to as much information as needed for the assignment. We're talking today with George Dell. We're talking about data. And there's a little company out there called Data Master. There's a reason they're called the master of data. They are the ability to download this kind of data directly into your appraisal report so that you can start to do the analysis side. No, Data Master will not analyze it for you. It will help you analyze it, and it will help you import it, and it will be a huge tool in your arsenal to do more with less. Go to datamasterusa.com and check them out and find out why you should be using them. datamasterusa.com. Speaking of the profession and where we're going, and George, when we get back, I want to talk to you about the future of appraising and what appraisers can expect, and more importantly, how they can position themselves for the future. But if you want to know what's going on in the future of appraising, folks, I go to Working RE magazine. I signed up for their free email. It goes out on a regular basis, a couple times a week. I have an email from Working RE in my inbox, and I quickly glance at the subject line and I decide whether or not I'm going to click on it or not. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I'll tell you, on a very regular basis, I'm very interested in what is there because it helps me to stay on top of the appraisal profession, not just for an appraiser coach, but also for an appraiser to make sure that you are positioning yourself for the future. It's workingre.com is where you're going to want to go and sign up for that email. Again, workingre.com. Finally, we are sponsored today by Alamode Software. Alamode is the software that I've been using to help analyze data, help crunch the numbers, help support that work file, being able to upload to a vault, to be able to keep that for the record-keeping rule. So many bells and whistles, if you will. I hesitate even using that term bells and whistles. It makes it sound cheap. I'm telling you, folks, this is a rich program full of tools that will help you to be more effective. If you are not already using Alamode, you need to go to alamode.com or call them at 800-ALAMODE. Again, 800-ALAMODE or alamode.com. And we are back, folks. We're talking with a very smart individual, an MAI, SRA, ASA designations. He's out of San Diego. He runs a blog called georgedell.com, and his name is George Dell. George, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
The reason we're talking today, George, in addition to the fact that I've wanted to have you on the program for a long time, I do read your blog, and I find it, can I be honest with you, George?
No.
I'll lie to you then. I find it very understandable and easy to read.
You keep calling me a smart fella, and that's nice, and I appreciate that. There's other nice things you could say about it. Really, what I did is I just went to school for many years. There's a long story behind that I won't bore you with. But basically, I took a lot of graduate education after I had become an appraiser in basically economics, econometrics, statistics, finance, and computer programming. And what I didn't know back then was that what I was studying was data science, except data science had not been invented yet. It was really, data science became something about 10, 12, 15 years ago. And yet today, there's graduate degrees, masters, and PhDs offered in data science all over the country, all over the world.
When I read your blog, George, I find that some of it goes over to my head. I'll just be honest with you. And that's why I call you a smart guy. You're either super smart or you're just using words that I don't understand. And I guess that maybe that's the one in the same. But you recently wrote a blog called "Can the Appraisal Profession Be Saved?" One of the questions that you asked in that I want to focus on for just a little bit is who cares? The question you asked is, does anyone care except us, meaning us appraisers? Do they?
Well, I think I broke that into two types of clients or users of appraisers. Ones that would really rather we stay the way we are because we're easy to influence. And there's been a lot of study on brain science and all that says that even when we believe we're not biased or prejudiced or influenced, we are. Our brain is not in charge. There's nobody in charge in our brain. There's little parts of our brain that do different things. That's interesting. So because of the subjectivity of what we do, again, going back to how the appraisal process was developed in the 1930s, the subjectivity can be taken advantage by a few people, and obviously some do. Then there's other kind of clients, and those that want a genuine answer. And they are on the opposite side of the fence. They don't want the subjectivity. They want something where the precision and the reliability of the result is something they can count on. And I think this is a key issue of what your earlier question, like where are we going in the future, what can be done. Ours is perhaps the only profession I know of that provides a point value and provides no estimate of the reliability of our own answer. An engineer who works with really hard numbers would never dream of saying, oh, that bridge is going to fall down in 73.2 years.
Love it.
Yeah, or a doctor. I've begun calling what I teach evidence-based evaluation, and I've copyrighted that term, evidence-based valuation. That I've copyrighted because I don't want the commercial providers to steal it.
I was already going to steal it until you said copyright. I was already writing it down.
It's too late. You feel free to use it. Obviously, I like credit once in a while.
There you go.
My concern is that the term then becomes abused. Some commercial provider and said, "Oh, we provide evidence-based valuation," and they ruin the whole concept of the marketing tool. So that's. I just want everybody to know that's the only reason I copyright some of the words in what I teach. Anyway, the evidence-based valuation is based on evidence or an objective measure of the data that we put in, the original comparable data, the competitive market segment, which is also copyright. And this actually came to me. A very close friend of mine is a nurse, and she said, "George, evidence-based medicine, what you're doing really sounds and feels like evidence-based medicine." And I said, "Well, what's the difference?" And the answer was, well, it's the difference between the doctor. You're sitting at the doctor's office, you got your shirt off, and he's poking and prodding you. And the doctor goes, I think you're sick. Versus the doctor says, we need to run some tests.
Yeah.
Let's get a second opinion. Now, in those two keywords, we need to run some tests. That's the key part of the science part of evidence-based valuation of the data science. The other part is we need to get another opinion. And that's the goal. It's the inevitable direction that valuation is going to end up in. We or some other profession will begin providing reports, results that are reproducible, replicable. Something that can be reproduced or replicated is a key part of science, so that somebody else can do exactly what you did and get the same result or very close. And then any modeling decisions stand out and can be easily looked at. And the result is the trueness, the accuracy is tremendously enhanced. There's a measure of reliability or risk, whatever you want to call it. And this opens up the doors to tremendous new markets for appraisers, or let me put it this way, the knowledge and capabilities and competence that appraisers have. They can make more money and be happier because there will be a greater demand for the appraiser competence when joined with computer power and modeling knowledge and competence. Appraisers can make more money, get better at prestige for what they're doing, and be happier at doing it.
I love this. As a side note, George, I have to tell you, last time I was in the doctor's office and took my shirt off, the doctor literally screamed and ran out of the room. That's beside the point. I love this. I love this idea. As you say, you teach classes, and I'm sure you talk with appraisers all the time. There is, we talked about this word fear. There is a fear out there, and I haven't copyrighted this term yet, but I think I made it up. That fear is a great motivator, but a poor problem solver. I repeat that quite often because I don't think fear is a bad thing in the sense that it might wake us up to say, "Hey, we need to do something different." I love what you're talking about, though. Fear should not lead what we do with that. Fear rather should allow us to be able to step back and say, okay, now let's logically make some decisions. And from what I'm hearing from you, George, we shouldn't be fearful of the future. We should be looking forward to, no, there's some change that's required. And maybe that's where the fear comes in. Appraisers want to keep doing what they've always done. Unfortunately, I think they're going to die on the vine doing that. But those that are willing to move forward and become scientists, if you will, and start to look at this data more objectively and be able to be the expert at interpretation. I think what you're saying is they've still got a future.
Absolutely. Sometimes I get resistance to what I teach or prophesy, and often it's like, no computer algorithm is ever going to replace my judgment. Well, to some extent that's true. I don't argue with that. However, the human beings have an incredible ability to generalize from very few data points. Maybe that's why 2 or 3 comps feels so good to us. And it's also important to remember that science requires art. Science, the scientific process method, generating hypotheses like, I think this is a house, that's a hypothesis, requires art, and it requires subject matter expertise. Subject matter expertise, like I'm an appraiser, I know my markets, is an essential part of data science. In the past, that was not an essential part of statistics. So art is a part of science, and ironically, science is a part of art. If you look into the history of art, perspective and the relationships, the golden triangle, the golden square, the square ratio. Good artists understand mathematical relationships between what they're drawing or singing or music. Think about music, the harmonics, tremendous amount of mathematics of that.
I think appraisers who might be listening to this would say, okay, George, sure, I get it. Okay, fine. I need to change. I need to do things different in the future. We are just inundated with data. We call it big data because it is a big data set. Sure, I need to learn how to interpret that. I need to become the expert in that. But in the end, George, I need to feed my family. I need to pay my mortgage and my car payment and my health insurance and everything else. I've got to be able to make money. And frankly, my clients or potential clients don't care about the appraisal profession anymore. They care about getting the loan done. They care about getting things done and moving on to the next. Rocket mortgage, comes to mind. The idea of getting through this process, they don't care about accuracy. So what am I to do, George? As an appraiser, I want a future. I want to be able to have a profession. How do I convince my customers, my clients, that I'm warranted, that I'm needed?
Well, some of this is actually going to have to come from our professional organizations. As you know, I'm a member of the Appraisal Institute, the American Society of Appraisers, the American Statistical Association, and certainly the Appraisal Foundation, Standards Board. Some of this guidance, hopefully, will come from them in the future. However, I started answering this question to myself about 15 years ago, 13, 14 years ago. And in my own practice, I was doing a lot of houses at that time and had several residential appraisers working with me. And one of the things I learned was that time adjustments are not hard. Once you get the complete competitive market segment copyrighted, using a simple regression and either a linear regression or a simple polynomial, which once you've done it 10 times, literally, it takes you about 15 seconds to do it. You can download the data, put it into a spreadsheet program, Excel. I recommend Numeric. That's GNUMERIC. It's open source. It's free. That's what I use in my classes. And create a graph and create a simple regression coefficient that gives you the exact price index time adjustment over the number of days back to the comp. Now, the reason I explained that was when I started putting that in my reports, and I started putting it in every residential Fannie Mae type report, I only got 2 of those ever back. Every one of my time adjustments from that point on was totally accepted. I got 2 of them back. One was the standardized statistical output back in those days had a whole bunch of stuff in there that imagined random sampling and all that inferential stuff that was not. And I put it in there because I thought it was smart to put the whole thing in, even though most of the information was useless. And one person said I'd cut it off at the bottom and I should explain all those things which were unexplainable. So I stopped putting in that whole thing and reporting just the number that mattered, which was the adjustment and the number of data points I used, how many comps. The second one that came back was obviously a very competent, being facetious here, reviewer, appraiser, who said, I have to fix my appraisal because he had been taught that absolutely appraisers should bracket every important element of comparison. And I had failed to do that because all my time adjustments were in the same direction.
Well, you better get a future comp then and bracket that, George.
I didn't do that. I really wanted to. I said, well, give me about a month and I'm sure we'll find one in the future and we can adjust downward.
That is hilarious.
The point of that being is that once I started using this simple and fast technology tool, a data science tool, a graph, my class is called Stats, Graphs, and Data Science. Once I started using that, I never got it. Other than those 2 coming back, I never had a problem. And yet, just that one tool alone is so tremendously powerful. If your best comp is 16 months old, suddenly it becomes a really good comp because you've got a very reliable time adjustment.
Love it.
So that's the point.
You wrote this blog. It's called "Can the Appraisal Profession Be Saved?" George, I don't know about you, but it sounds like the answer to that is yes. I mean, I hate to not drive people to the article and spoiler alert, we can save our profession and we need to, right?
We can do what we can do. I'm still not convinced of that. There's so much regulation. The standards set up a subjective test of what we do. Our regulatory arms, the state licensing. I believe that bureaucracies tend to stay put and continue insisting on doing things the way they've always been done. So we have several battles to find. My positive message here is that an individual appraiser can make a difference, and the time adjustment example is probably the key to that. We need to perhaps encourage our organizations, the Appraisal Foundation, the Appraisal Institute, the American Society of Appraisers that I belong to, and our other ones, NAFA, was just now merging into ASA, and perhaps even on the state regulation level, that something other than the traditional point value. Here's the value, that's it, that's end of my appraisal. Clients need a lot more than a point value. In particular, they need a reliability measure. What can an individual do? Start doing the little things. Come to my class. Learn how to do these things. That's what I teach. I've been teaching for many years.
Tell us more about that. How would someone take a class from you, George?
Well, obviously go to georgedell.com, and in there you'll find a link to my school, which is valuemetrics.info. Basically, it's just me and my assistant. We teach all over the country. Typically, I'll teach a class once a month or so. I'm hoping to do more, hoping to do some online stuff in the near future. It's just me. One person can only do so much. As you know, with what you do, I admire the things you do. You're helping get good information out to the appraiser profession, and that will reflect in serving the public good. I mean, this is what we're supposed to. Why we're a professional. We're supposed to serve the public good.
Absolutely. And speaking of good information, I assume an appraiser can sign up for your blog. It's emailed out on a pretty regular basis. Just go to georgedell.com if they want to do that.
Yes.
Perfect.
All we need is your name, your email address, and something else. I don't know, your phone number possibly.
Social security number? No?
That and 3 credit card numbers.
Well, as long as I copyright it, I'll give it to you. George Dell from georgedell.com. Thank you for joining us today, my friend. I think the future of appraising is bright. And speaking of which, if you want to leverage yourself and allow you to be able to change as the change happens, we would love to have you a part of our Appraiser Academy. You can find it at theappraisercoach.com. Go to memberships, and we meet on a regular basis, once a month, online, live, and we are talking about the changes in the appraisal world, and more importantly, how you, as a business owner, can position yourself to be able to be successful into the future. Once again, good shout out to George Dell. Would love to have him back on the program again in the future. Super smart guy, as I keep saying. I know it embarrasses him a bit, but he is. He's a smart guy. He understands where we're going as a profession, and I've learned a lot today. So thank you, George, for being on the program. And folks, we'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.